Yeah, so I think this is the most important change that I've had. The way that I think about knowledge and our place in the universe and understanding the universe is much more broad and pluralistic than it was then. And I think that's partially because my view of reality now is that it's a sort of creation between a something in a human consciousness. It's a symbolic creation. Now, that doesn't mean I'm subscribing to like ultra postmodern constructionism, but it does mean that I accept that humans will always inhabit a world rife with meanings and symbolic resonances and good, evil, etc. All of these important concepts. And if we want to understand, therefore, the human universe, we have to understand those components of existence. So I give an example, and this is actually one that caused me to start thinking about this. If you see a woman, her head bowed at a gravestone in a cemetery, and you want to explain what's happening there, of course, you could take the physicist approach and just describe like the distribution of matter in the cemetery and predict how things will fall, etc. You could explain it as a biologist. You could explain it as an evolutionary psychologist. You could attempt to argue that grief serves some kind of evolutionary function. All of that would be empty compared to a couple paragraphs from Dostoevsky about that, right? I mean, I think that would actually allow you to know more about what's happening than any of the other stuff you could read about it from these different disciplines. And that made me think, if I'm holding the view that that is somehow just describing experience and it's not giving me knowledge about the world, that's a wrong view. My view is erroneous, and I need to update and adapt to this reality.
So I wouldn't disagree with that. But you mentioned two paragraphs from Dostoevsky, whereas I asked about literary and artistic criticism.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
You need to justify the, the argument that these meta disciplines,
Yes.
meta artistic disciplines, provide a different mode of knowledge acquisition to science, which I think is more contestable.
Oh, I would have argued that this holds for those disciplines a fortiori because they're dealing with things that exist only through human intentions and meaning. That is to say, a literary text or a painting. So let's take a literary text. If we're grappling with crime and punishment, uh, will understanding so like an evolutionary psycho and in fact evolutionary psychologists have done this. They've written books about storytelling and why do humans tell stories and why do certain stories catch on and others are not so interesting. I think that's important, and I've read a lot of those works and they've enhanced my understanding of why humans produce art. I don't think they would enhance my understanding of crime and punishment. I think somebody who understands literature, understands the history of literature, understands Dostoevsky's influences and how texts work together, can tell me more about crime and punishment and make me think, well, first of all, it would be more edifying, but also make me think more about what Dostoevsky's doing or what the text is doing. I just think that that's the realm of literary criticism, and that's the unique value and knowledge, I would say, that literary critics are providing. And I think I vote with my feet or clicking with my fingers, as it were, because I've always been interested in literary criticism, film criticism. For example, the first thing I do after I watch a movie is I check to see what Roger Ebert thought about it. I want, and you know what? Sometimes I read his review and I probably don't get much from it, or maybe I'm irritated and I disagree with him. But also, often I find my understanding of the film has improved. He's raised issues, drawn attention to a shot I missed, etc. So no, I think that is definitely adding like real knowledge about the materials of art and literature.
So couldn't one argue that literary and artistic and other forms of criticism must nonetheless conform to the scientific method broadly defined, i.e., they must, if someone is putting forward a particular interpretation of a film, for example, i.e., this film is about the meaning of X, or this, that is putting forward a particular account of the symbolism within a film. They have to like state their hypotheses in a reasonably coherent way, and then adduce evidence from the film, or perhaps from the author's other works or from related works, in order to convince their readers or listeners of their point of view.
Okay,
Isn't literary and artistic criticism more similar to science than either are to actually making artistic works to begin with?
I think that that's a fair argument, and it relates to something that Sam Harris has written. So he wrote, when you're adhering to the highest standards of logic and evidence, you are thinking scientifically. So from that perspective, what you just said would be scientific thinking. And indeed, Harris has a particularly capacious view of science. And maybe you were forwarding one that's pretty capacious. I I don't know that that debate is particularly illuminating, where we get obsessed with like where's the demarcation between science and non-science. Although I understand I'm making the claim that it's sort of not science, so I made I made that an issue. I would be happy to say that it's maybe in the penumbra between not like probably good criticism is somewhere between art itself and science broadly understood. I think that's a fair assertion. Yeah.